time.
I'm Gwen Preston of Resource Maven, and I'm here at the Metals Investor Forum in Vancouver in September, and I'm joined by Greg Beischer of Alaska Energy Metals. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Gwen. Well, it's always nice to come to Vancouver from home base in Alaska. I'm glad to be part of this conference again.
Absolutely. And you're here, I mean, the again is that the company that you had for many years that we loved, Millrock, has transformed, and it's become Alaska Energy Metals because you took on a project that is near and dear to your heart called Nikolai. I love that it basically has the word nickel, even though that's not what the word actually is, because it's a nickel sulfide project. So before we get into the details of Nikolai, the project, talk to us about nickel sulfide deposits. I mean, nickel sulfide deposits are important, but rare. But expound on that a little bit for everyone.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. A lot of geologists never end up working in nickel.
True.
But I was fortunate to work for Inco, the major Canadian producer that was born in Sudbury, Ontario.
Yeah.
And there's just incredible nickel sulfide deposits in Sudbury. The ore is just dripping with metal. And I was fortunate to be underground there a few times. It's truly astounding. But these are very, very rare deposits. The geologic processes that form them just don't happen very many places in the world. And nickel's a very useful metal, so us geologists have been hunting for it for a century, ever since Sudbury was discovered. And well, I think all the easy, massive sulfide-rich deposits are gone. Maybe if our whole industry tries really, really hard, we would find another one. I doubt we'd find a big collection of them like at Sudbury or Norilsk in Russia. Mm-hmm. So I just see that if there's a huge surge in demand for a sustained period, there's simply not enough supply to meet the demand.
And especially when you layer onto that supply-demand setup, the desire from countries and or end users for that nickel to be friendly and clean. And so there's a lot in that sentence, but both the battery makers and the countries want nickel that plays to the green story. And laterite deposits, which are the common nickel deposits in some equatorial parts of the world, they are not by any means clean.
No, I understand that it takes a lot of energy to separate laterite nickel from its ore. And if there's a good source of cheap energy, like hydroelectric or something like that, it would be fine.
Yeah.
But they burn coal to separate that nickel. And, if the whole idea is to make electric vehicles, then...
to reduce our emissions, yes. But then you're pumping a bunch of CO2 from burning coal to create the nickel,
Right.
Yeah.
And so sulfide nickel is better suited for the purity to make electric vehicle batteries than is laterite. It's not that you can't use laterite ores to get there, but it takes a lot of energy to refine it that far.
Absolutely.
So laterite's better suited to stainless steel production, which of course is the base use of nickel that we've used it for decades and decades now. But this is a brand new use.
Absolutely.
I love these things that disrupt society,
Absolutely.
Disrupting taxis. It's things like this that are world changing. And so I feel fortunate that we saw this potential coming. We're able to acquire those mineral rights in Alaska a couple of years ago.
So let's talk about these mineral rights. Back in the 90s, when you were with Inco, you actually went up in this area looking for the kind of massive sulfide nickel deposits that they loved in Sudbury. You didn't find those. So in the 90s, that was a disappointment. But what you did find was a large, consistent zone of disseminated. So instead of massive, where the rock is mostly made of sulfide, that's what massive means. Disseminated means it's distributed through a host rock. you found a big disseminated zone of nickel mineralization.
We did. We drilled into it, and it was very interesting because it was such a thick mineralized zone. I didn't even realize after 5 years of exploration, though, how long it was. And others came along after me, drilled more holes, and wow, this thing is 10 or 12 kilometers long. It's huge and amazingly consistent, homogeneous, which you, as a geologist, know. Geology's
Never homogeneous.
Homogeneous. You know, things change in the earth, but this particular sill in the mafic, ultramafic complex appears to be uniformly mineralized over kilometers.
That's amazing. So there were holes drilled back in the 90s, not closely spaced enough to actually define a resource. So the opportunity as Alaska Energy Metals is to come in and turn a known zone into a resource. And you guys have a very clear plan for what you're going to do over the next 2 years.
We do. We're going to build the resource. We have to prove it. I'm almost positive that the nickel is there, but I have to prove that. So we have to drill it off on a grid system. Amazingly, because it is so homogeneous, we only have to drill it every 300 meters. So, like, you know, in gold deposits,
every 12 meters, yeah.
So we're able to block out a huge tonnage. We've just finished drilling 8 holes, and that'll allow us to block out, on the order of 600 million tons of mineralized rock. And once I get the assays, I can say it's a deposit of nickel.
There you go. And so you did 8 holes. You're going to do that. You have some historic data that might bring a second zone in with enough spacing. Then you sort of repeat the process next summer, drill another reasonably modest program, really 8 holes, 12 holes, something like that, and end up with a deposit. This is the game plan that rivals some of the nickel companies out there with sulfide deposits that are worth many, many times your market cap.
Right. Within 2 seasons of drilling, I think we'll have a deposit with enough contained metal that the biggest mining companies in the world will be looking at it. And, realistically, this will be a deposit that's only suited for some of the biggest mining companies in the world.
And I actually like what you pointed out, I think, during the Q&A session about Anglo coming in with Canadian nickel, because that is an endorsement of exactly what you just said. It's one thing to arm wave and say the biggest mining companies in the world are going to want my project, but it's another thing when that literally just played out.
Right. Honestly, it's taken me a little while to adjust my thinking. I'm always a grade is king sort of a geologist, and that's still true no matter what. But big companies like multi-decade mining operations so that they can catch a couple of the price spikes that makes things pay off big. But I still had to work to convince myself this was the right thing to go after.
Yeah, for sure. But
when I saw companies like Anglo American investing in Canada Nickel, a great company that has a very similar deposit, they're a few years ahead of us. But at least Anglo American must believe that our industry will be mining nickel deposits that are in the 0.25% range. And Glencore also, I know, being very aggressive. They're looking this far down the food chain at development, really early stage development companies, because they know the pipeline of nickel projects is very, very limited. I think it's a complete paradigm shift in nickel mining that is like the shift that occurred in copper mining in the 1950s. Remember before that, it was high-grade veins, it was volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits, and it was sediment-posted copper deposits.
High-grade stuff.
Yes, but there was 2 things. There was a huge surge in demand for copper as we've started to build subdivisions, laid wires and pipes and everything else, but also there was a process technology change that enabled us to mine porphyry copper deposits in huge, bulk mineable, low concentration deposits. And so I think that the nickel business is now following the copper business. It has to.
It has to.
Because there's simply not enough high-grade supply out there to be found.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a pretty interesting story, and I certainly look forward to seeing these assays from these 8 holes that are pending, and watch you march along this plan over the next 18 months.
I'm quite excited about it. As in my former company, we were really always at the earliest stage, generating the earliest stage projects. This one's further along, and it's exciting to be moving into a development phase.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Gwen.